Hi, and welcome back to Soul Food Sunday. I realize it'll be a bit of a shock to see me instead of Kezra, but there's a good reason for that. I thought it would be worthwhile in the context of our signature soul food course, which is really Kezra's baby, to also give my own personal perspective, but also the masculine perspective on this, because I think that there will be a perception that this is somehow primarily feminine, primarily for women, and aimed at them because it's being delivered by Kezra and it's her conception. But that, of course, is not true. And I felt it would be useful as an interlude before, in 2 weeks' time, Kezra digs deep into the how to implement a soul food practice, that I give you my perspective and tell you about my experience with soul food. Because, of course, having known Kezra for a long time, my experience predates this being a course or a workshop at all, and more of a lived experience. And I thought it would be helpful to hear from me what that's been like as a man. And of course, to acknowledge my resistance to that idea early on, and to talk through what got me past those traditional male barriers to anything that involves the soul or the spirit or spirituality or things that are regarded as woo or soft. I'm here to reassure everybody that that is really not at all what we're talking about here. I know that this has come across potentially as an esoteric subject, but once you dig into it, you realize it's not at all. It's a crucial life hack that will help you enjoy your life, get a better experience out of life, in the same way I hope that it's helped me. So whilst everybody's journey is different, I think that I can point the way towards something that will really enhance your experience of life, provide you with joy and contentment. I always start with definitions. Any of you who have watched my Power of Words and Language series will know that I'm slightly obsessed by the good use of language. And so when we first started talking about this, Kezra and I, some years ago, I was skeptical about, firstly, the existence of the soul, but more fundamental to that, what soul meant, right? It's been used so interchangeably with so many concepts. And I know even Kezra in her first interviews going, well, soul can be spirit, inner child, connection, the cosmos. Now, I don't particularly agree with that. I think it works in the context of the soul food course. But for me, I need more precision. And so I always head to, firstly the definition and then look at what it means to me. And the soul is defined as that spiritual or immaterial part of a human being, or indeed for many people of an animal, including me, that's often regarded as immortal, that somehow that's fundamental to you as a person. And of course it has that ancillary meaning of the emotional, intellectual energy or intensity that revealed usually through a work of art or music, right? Soul, it has soul. I'll tell you what it means to me more directly. I believe that soul, my soul, is that part of me that lasts throughout your life, at least. It may be immortal, but I'm not going to go down that route. It doesn't need to be. It's that identity, that core of me that survives all the changes in my age, my circumstances, my physical existence. Because we know that the cells that make up our bodies now, there's not a single one that made up our body 7 years ago, 10 years ago. And yet the little boy of 5 who was me, and now the man of 57 who is me, has no physical connection at all, not one cell, nothing relates between that 5-year-old Ian and the 57-year-old Ian. And yet it's the same person. So what element is the same? Was that little boy me? Am I that little boy? Well, yes and no. And in the yes, that's where my soul is. It is my soul. It is the soul of that little boy that lives on in me. That is the continuity. So for me, soul is that element, that immaterial, that spiritual element of me, that is me. That is the continuity of me between the child that was born back in January of 1964 and the man that exists now. It's a core part of me, right? Body, mind, and spirit. I would say body, mind, and soul, or the soul that can inhabit the mind. I'm not going to go into that. I think you get the idea that soul is a core part of your identity. In fact, to me, soul is what sets you apart from every other human being on the planet. There are 7 point something billion of us. What makes you unique? To some extent it's your body, but then you have to go down to, well, like it's fingerprints and DNA, but then that doesn't even work because your DNA might be the same as that of an identical twin, for example. My sons are identical twins, so they share the same DNA. That doesn't set them apart. What sets them apart as individuals is their soul. And that's what sets you apart and what sets me apart from everyone else. So it's that core unique feature of you. That makes it really, really important, I think. And so feeding that soul is what Kezra and what Conversations Worth Having is all about, and what our soul food course is about. So, right, having kind of nailed down what soul is, at least for me, I was first introduced to this, as I say, probably about 2.5, 3 years ago. And Kezra started it. It didn't have a name then, but it had a concept. She always used to ask me, what are you doing for you? What do you do that's just for you, that fires you up, that feeds your soul? And I'd be like, I'm not even sure I've got a soul. This was long before I started really digging into my spiritual journey. And so the more I looked at that, the more I realized that the way in which I lived my life actually had very little element that was purely for me, that nourished me. And I also didn't think that was particularly important because I had obligations, responsibilities that I was fulfilling. I had a family to look after. I had a responsibility to a career, to, well, I didn't have a boss. I haven't had a boss for years. I am the boss. So, but responsibilities to a workforce, my employees, my business partners. And so it seemed frivolous, right? It seemed self-indulgent. Why should I do anything that's just for me? Okay, beyond, those odd things that you just drift into, like getting really pissed or binging a Netflix show or something. I had no intentional soul food, as Kezra's introduced it. I think you probably get the concept by now. Things that fire you up, that you do for you. I used to fall into things that happened to do that, but I had no plan, I had no structure to that at all. I certainly didn't give myself permission for a regular soul food practice. And so the why took a little bit of time to dawn on me. And Kezra set this out so beautifully in her video 2 weeks ago. But for me at a personal level, it was realizing that when I fed my soul, I had more to give others. So there was the passive result, which was that I became a nicer person to be around. So all my kind of neurotic symptoms of my dis-ease, things like flashes of anger, my sarcasm, my somewhat irrational approach to things, my anal approach to things, which was always that everything had to be arranged and organized, and I couldn't deal with spontaneity at all. I couldn't deal with changes of plan. In other words, I was a bit of a prickly person to be around, not that pleasant. I had a lot to give, but I was also giving from a half-empty cup most of the time. I was struggling. I was also a people pleaser, and so my giving came from a pretty bad place, really. Not a place of real desire to give, but a place of wanting validation, wanting affirmation. And that's not the right motivation for giving. The giving may result in good things, but my motivation for it sometimes caused resentment in me because I was giving in return for something or wishing for the return of something. And when that thing was not given back, resentment arose. So here I was steaming with little bits of resentment all the time, giving, not giving from a good place, and certainly not giving from a full vessel. And so it turns out that feeding our soul isn't just good for us, but it's good for everyone around us. in my experience, it turned me into a far, far more pleasant person to be around. And it also completely changed the nature of the way in which I gave. I'm no longer giving from the need to please people. I'm giving because I want to give. I'm giving from fullness in my heart, in my soul. And that is a direct result of me feeding me through soul food. And so the why is pretty obvious to me. It's a vital part of my ability to be the best person I can be, to be the person I want to be. In order to be that person, that guy who really desires to be, and I think is, a little bit better every day, a little bit more outward looking, a little bit more giving from a beautiful place in my heart, a little more loving, a little more compassionate, a little bit more empathetic. That comes from the fact that my soul is full, well-fed, nourished. So that's the why for me. Now, what were the barriers of getting there? Before I go on to the how, right? That was the why for me. But the biggest barrier for me, looking back at this in retrospect, was getting past that resistance in me to something that felt so self-indulgent. Right? As I said before, it was realizing that it was vital, and then the key step, and this is a big part of the how, was giving myself permission to do it, right? Giving myself permission to do those things that light me up, that fire me up, to giving the time. Because that was the next biggest obstacle for me, was time. I had filled my life with stuff that I believed to be in service of others, to a degree in service of myself. I did believe, still believe, in service. Right? How may I serve? I absolutely believe that. It's a key value of mine. But what I had also done in the process of that is ram my time up with shoulds. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should be living this way. I should be saying this. I should be doing this. My life was just an action list. Right? It was a series of responsibilities that I was fulfilling with vigor, except really to myself and my soul. And so I had to find time. Once I knew the why, once I had given myself permission to implement a soul food practice, I had to find the time. That was a very practical thing. And part of that process, which I think I've talked about before, was implementing the 5 a.m. Club, Robin Sharma's book, which I think I've told you kind of irritated me as a book, but as an idea, magnificent and life-changing. Simple, certainly not easy. Anybody, I recommend that you read that book. Look past this, what I thought were the strained analogies and the way in which he chose to convey the message, which didn't gel with me, but the message gelled with me. And the reason it gelled and has been so beneficial to me is that it carved out that time for me. And I've talked about this before, so I won't go into it in any detail. But what it means for me is that the first 2 hours of the day, at least, from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. every day, is my time. That's for me. That's when I implement my structured practice. I meditate, I journal, I do my gratitude and metta practices, I do my creative writing, I do my learning, my reading. Stuff that is purely for me. And anything else I do in the day is a bonus, right? Of course I meditate at other times. I do short gratitude practices. I do short metta practices. I will watch funny videos on YouTube. I'll talk about that in a second. But I do those consciously, and I do them in gaps that I carve out for myself, yes, as part of my soul food. But the core of it was creating that slot at the beginning of the day so that I had a structured time, because I need structure, in which to nourish my soul, to give myself that time. So I had to give myself permission, get past the idea that it was self-indulgent on the why, give myself permission, and then create the time. And that comes down to the real nub of how do you implement a soul food practice. Because everybody's actual practice will be different. The things that light you up, that you do as part of a soul food practice, will be very different to what I do. So I'll talk very briefly about what I do and the way I came to it, which is what Kezra is going to talk about, I'm certain. I don't know what she's going to talk about, but this will be my guess, right? As I think that she's going to talk about how you create your soul food blueprint. And this is what I did, is that I looked at my life at the time that I had given myself this permission and I was beginning to implement the 5 a.m. club ideas and carve out the time. I said, what lights me up? What fires me up? What makes my soul sing? What gives me joy? What doesn't feel like work? You know, what do I dream of doing? When I think, oh, if I had 2 weeks off, what would I do? I started listing those things. Now for me, they range from really big things to little things. Now, a lot of what I do with conversations worth having is soul food to me. So, doing this video, that's soul food to me. I love talking about my journey and the idea that I may be helping even just one person to shape their own journey, to get more enjoyment and a better experience of life. That fires me up. So that was high up on my list. Creative writing was high up on my list. Writing music, well, I say writing music. I can't write music, but I use GarageBand to write music, right? It's nice, simple for non-musical idiots like me. I love poetry. I write a lot of poetry. Now, I have no idea how good it is because I don't really show it to anyone. I just do it for me, right? But that lights me up, that fires me up. And so creative writing, I wanted to write a novel, that's a big thing. And then there were little things on the list. There were things like, okay, I really get a kick out of watching fail videos on YouTube. They make me laugh. I love it when people fall and trip up or do something stupid. I mean, it makes me laugh. Now, I used to scroll those mindlessly, but now I intentionally create short blocks of time to cheer myself up in those blocks, because I tend to work in kind of 45 to 50 minute blocks, and then I take 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes to do something non-work related or away from work so that I can keep my focus on what I'm doing. And in those blocks, I might just sit down and watch a 5-minute video that just, it makes me laugh. It takes me out of my work head. And so there were these sort of little things on my list. Exercise, doing my workout every day, preparing a meal every day. A proper meal, I mean, is as a single guy, you can easily fall into that habit of just buying ready meals or cooking whatever's quickest. But I made myself a promise a couple of years ago that I would prepare and cook at least one proper meal every day. And I do that, and I do it mindfully, and it really fills me with great joy to do that. And so I created that blueprint, as I say, that listed everything that was these big tasks down to these little things like, watch a video or watch a comedy on Netflix or something like that. But the trick for me personally is that I'm very intentional about it, because I try very hard to live mindfully. I try not to live by default. So I try not to spend time just by default scrolling social media, Instagram and these sort of things. Now, I'm by no means perfect, but my meditation practice has made me a hell of a lot better at being present and able to engage in the present and be in the moment and to be intentional and to be very deliberate about what I do. Of course, I find myself drifting. This reminds me actually of the fact that we tend to think of the way in which we act as being from an element of free will and by choice. And we get outraged by the way in which we're manipulated by social media, for example. So anyone who's watched The Social Dilemma, these guys are manipulating us with their algorithms. But we forget that our own minds and ways of being are an algorithm. It's a bunch of stuff we put in there, and mostly we then just put out the same series of default actions, the same conditioning results. So we act like we are conditioned the same way in which social media algorithms are trying to condition us. And we need to step out of that. Perhaps we don't need to. I'm full of shoulds here. I'm telling you what to do. That's not what I mean to do. For me, it was important to step out of that and to be intentional and to be deliberate. And the only way in which I can do that is to be mindful. And soul food is my soul food is an absolutely vital part of that mindfulness for me. Because it is in giving myself permission and then doing those things that feed my soul that tend to make me present. Meditation is soul food to me. It's something that I love, not just for what it trains me to do in being mindful, but because I love the state that I achieve most of the time when I am meditating. That is soul food to me. So, be intentional, be deliberate, create your blueprint, and Kezra will give you fantastic advice in 2 weeks' time on how to do that. But that's what I did. And then I started looking at, well, when can I fit these things into my day? Giving myself mindful permission to feed my soul, to do those things. And it's worked out just so well for me because it's made me happier. It's raised my median level of contentment. It has made me a far nicer person to be around. It has made me able to give from a far better place, from a full cup. So I'm able to pour into others, into my projects, from a feeling of fullness and not from dragging it out of me from that half full or even many times very empty cup. And so it has transformed my life over time. And when Kezra started constructing this into a course through many discussions with us, with me, with her friends, and really honing her ideas into this course, it came from many, many years of her personal experience, as you've seen in her earlier videos, of transforming her life. I'm here to say it's transformed my life. It's something that men and people who occupy that masculine space, so even if you're a woman who lives in the masculine more, or a man who lives in the feminine who might have already got this, it will benefit all of us. This is not a woman thing. This is an everybody thing. And I would urge you, particularly you men, to get past the idea that this is somehow woo, that this is somehow self-indulgent, that this is somehow unnecessary. It's none of those things. It's practical, it's real, and it's vital. It's not self-indulgent, it's necessary, it's vital. And so please join us. Join us on the Soul Food Sundays, and please strongly consider joining Kezra on the Soul Food course when it launches soon, because it will transform your life. There's so much more depth than what we've revealed so far and what we've talked about. There's so many wonderful places to go, and I'm sure I'm going to do more videos on this because it's something that lights me up and it feeds my soul, and I'd love it to feed yours. And then, as I said earlier, just to round off, one of the great resistances that I had to get past in implementing a soul food practice was that resistance to something that felt self-indulgent. It felt somehow wrong. So even at an early point when my mind understood why I should do it and my heart wanted to do it, there was part of me, perhaps my soul, my conditioned soul, my experience, my trauma, wherever it came from, my conditioning, that was resisting stepping into a soul food practice. And what I've done since, and that was almost by accident that I overcame that in these little messy, windy steps that resulted, say, I don't know, a year and a half or so ago in what is now my soul food practice, is that I have now, and I've talked about this on my IGTV live last week on fear, I've now found a ritual, a way, and an explanation for transcending, for getting past, for bypassing that resistance, and not just to implementing a soul food practice, but to anything. So perhaps resistance to entering in more depth into an intimate relationship, accepting a proposal of marriage, buying a house, moving city, accepting a job, leaving a job, any of those big decisions where perhaps the pros and cons have been weighed up, where your mind wants to do something, where your heart thinks it's the right idea, but there's a resistance, there's a fear, there's just something stopping you from your hell yes. That instead of it being a hell yes, it's a kind of, I'd love to, but, or yes, but. It's not a no, it's not a hell no, because that tells us something that we need to know, but it's not a hell yes. You want it to be a hell yes, but it isn't. How do you get there? In June, I'll be running a workshop, short workshop, 60 to 90 minutes on transcending fear, on transcending that resistance, on bypassing it, on getting to your dream. And I would urge you to look out for that course. We'll do all the promotional materials, and we'll be launching it in conjunction with the tribe membership, which I'm super excited about, coming in a few weeks. And please look out for this course if that's something that resonates with you, if that's something that you feel, whether it's resistance to starting your own soul food practice or resistance to anything else where you want to do something, but there's something stopping you. I think I can help you with that, and I look forward to seeing you on that workshop, probably towards the end of June, beginning of July. Super exciting, but in the meantime, enjoy your Soul Food Sunday, implement a soul food practice, do something for you, do something that fires you up. Just enjoy it. Kezra will be back in 2 weeks' time to tell you exactly how to start your soul food practice. Thanks, and have a lovely day.